She's muted. I'm sorry. I still can't hear you. But at least I think.
I was like,
oh, there you go.
how are you?
Good.
How's life? I feel like I haven't talked to you forever.
I know. This is the sad thing about Sync Health and Gravity not being completely intertwined anymore.
Well, I am social determinants of health lead at Sync Health, so.
Oh, I know. We should just keep our little meetings going and just hang out more.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Corey's here. I love the Corey. I love that you're coming to this. Just goes to show how much time is needed to socialize things. Hi, Corey. Welcome everybody. I'm going to wait for some individuals to join the chat. To join the call. It's only the 3:01. I think I'll wait until like at least a little after 3. Katya, maybe you can help me see how many. I can't see how many guests we have today, right now. Can you give me the number?
There's about 8 if you don't include Linda.
Okay.
Up to 9.
That's okay. You don't have to include me.
Oh my Lord, no, Linda's most important. I think I'll wait till 3:05 and then get started because it's just mostly lots of background information.
Brian, I just wanted to say I acknowledge your chat. If you're standing in for Daniel, that's totally fine.
Thank you. I thought asking permission was the polite thing to do.
No problem.
Brian, you don't have to ask permission to be places, friend. It's your family. This is a permission granted organization.
I feel so honored.
Yeah. Well, we're honored too. Okay, so I'm gonna start a little bit after. I'm gonna start at 3:05. That's what I'm saying.
By the way, Sarah, that was a very interesting TAC meeting yesterday.
Wasn't it though? It was very interesting. I think it's good. I think this is the kind of the kind of understanding finding that we need to do to actually complete the mission, right? We're not gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is what it's all about.
Sarah, did you see the email from Lisa that she couldn't get into the meeting?
I know, but we were in there until I think the problem
okay.
is, yeah, I think she joined at, well, yeah, we were in that meeting waiting until just before this call when we all went to get ourselves tea.
So I just saw her email, so maybe that wasn't about this meeting. It was about a prior one. Okay.
Yeah, it was about the CDA meeting next. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start. We're being very chatty in classic Gravity fashion, and I do apologize. That tends to be my way. So this is Sarah DeSilvi, the Director of Clinical Informatics for the Gravity Project. I'm here with my amazing colleagues in the Terminology Division, Linda Hyde and Katya Schell. understanding that it's very hard to fully grasp the complexity of things within each of our scheduled meetings, and because the importance really of this ICD-10-CM submission, we wanted to do a deep dive to ensure any questions are answered from our many stakeholders. And so we have this little call, and it seems to have been working. We have a nice quorum. So what we're going to do is kind of first settle and focus on the actual submission process and what was put forward, so you all can really understand it. We haven't shown this to the collective because it's really just too hard when we're doing slides to show. But if everyone can remember, it was a year ago that we submitted, well, much more than a year ago, but a year ago we submitted a combined set of ICD-10-CM codes. Some of them they all were reviewed in March. Some were accepted and for early release in this just recent October 2021 release. These are the food insecurity and housing instability codes in the homelessness stratification codes. So those are all live. And then the sets that you see in this submission were requested to be revisited in September. So in that time, oh, sorry. Margaret, you have a cough?
Sorry.
No, I know, this is the clinician in me can't help but worry about folks.
Thank you.
So in that time, there were a couple other submissions. So one from the American Academy of Pediatrics and one from someone we don't know. And they were all conjoined into a social determinants of health presentation that was presented by the staff at the ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee in September. So there are important things to note as well regarding ICD-10-CM process. So there were changes. What we're seeing here is, and what were our recommendations that we have for comments on ICD-10-CM. Some of the things that we are commenting on are changes in our own strategy based on evolution of Gravity content. Some are comments that we have on how the CDC ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee changed our submission. So in the veterans element, it was actually changed based on how we presented it first, and we're asking that that be revised. And then some of our comments that we have are really on just wanting to look deeper into some of the suggestions in the submission all told. So I'm now going to, we did include, this is publicly available. This is on the ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee meeting webpage. You can download it. I always am sure to download it whenever I'm talking about it. There's a hyperlink available in the slide set, and we'll be talking about how to comment in the future, but I really just want to kind of run down the submission right now just to make sure anybody has any questions that they need to have answered. So this is the general merge submission, right? There's a lot of background. You can see that we go through, there's a little paragraph for each of the different concepts. Again, health insurance and security, we're going to talk about that. That was not a Gravity concept, but financial insecurity, material hardship, the socioeconomic risk counseling. So all of these things were contained within our initial work. So anytime that you go do an ICD-10-CM submission, it requires adjustments to not just the code itself within the taxonomy, but suggestions of inclusion terms. And Linda, pipe in if you, Linda really is the expert in ICD in the room. So pipe in if you have any thoughts here, and if I'm saying anything incorrectly. But the Gravity has no suggestions or changes regarding transportation insecurity. That term remains as we submitted it. It's had no edits in the process. The inclusion terms align with all of our subdomains, and so if one wanted to comment and add support for this concept, that's what Gravity will be doing here, but we don't necessarily have to comment in support of our own submission. But if anybody in the ecosystem wanted to put forth a letter regarding the importance of Z59.82, transportation insecurity, that would be helpful. Anything that we have specific comments on, I'm going to save because we're going to reference the slide set. Any questions so far? And as I'm going through, does anybody have any specific question regarding what we're going to be spending our time on or what I've already covered? Okay, just stop me at any time. I cannot see the chat because I'm sharing.
So I asked one question about if they do a letter, can you provide us information on how to send it?
Yes, we can. There's a slide at the end. Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely can. And in fact, what we'll do is everyone who responded to this session, we will just hyperlink an email to all of you that includes all the links directly, the email for the the ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee, and the deadlines, which is November 15th. And those are on the slides to come, but absolutely we will show you how. So now if that's the only question, I'm holding space for the health insurance and security because we have thoughts, but I want to show everybody, because it's actually kind of important. You can see underneath health insurance and security, we have high deductible health care, lack of health insurance, and medical cost burden, all those concepts. And we'll revisit that on our slides. The next concept that Gravity submitted was financial insecurity. This was to cover financial strain that's not necessarily co-occurring, but could co-occur with low income or poverty. When we covered this domain 9 months ago, like we started, it's almost a year ago. We really were trying to represent the known risks of financial insecurity and financial strain that are not currently covered in ICD-10-CM, which really only has concepts for poverty, and so therefore, and low income, so this would not be applicable. And you can see the excludes terms are down here. We ourselves have a comment on material hardship based on where we've come and what we had no control over. And that I'm going to save this for our conversation that we're going to have when we go to the slides. But you can see as we defined it a year ago, we were trying to cover the inability to obtain social needs, which is the definition of material hardship. And so we are going to revisit that in a second, but because that's on the slides. And then this is something that we actually, I'm just going to pass over this because this is kind of procedural. The next sections, caregiver noncompliance with, well, actually that's an excludes term. I'm going to keep on going. There's a lot of ICD-10 formulation comments in the rest of this document, which I don't feel we need to go through. Linda is more than able to comment on them if anybody has questions. But whenever you see bolded excludes or includes terms, that's just the process of ICD-10-CM. So the other things that are really important to highlight is we did ask last year for a new concept for patients' noncompliance with dietary regimen due to financial hardship. That's been a request for about 3 years going in collaboration with the AAFP, because noncompliance, we have other noncompliance due to financial hardship concepts in ICD-10-CM, specifically regarding medicines, and the effect of financial hardship on inability to follow prescribed dietary regimens was unrepresented. And so as part of our food insecurity build, way back in the Wayback Machine, this was a recommended concept through our colleagues at the AAFP and our colleagues at the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And again, there's no changes here. So we're holding space for our comments, we're holding space for health literacy and holding space for material hardship right now. And then you can see there are a few other elements that we're changing regarding noncompliance. These bolded codes here are all the AAP, right? So this is not Gravity. More than happy to participate in commenting on the requirement of these from a family medicine perspective. This is a really critical missing area. So this is, and honestly, I don't know if necessarily all of these concepts are necessarily social determinants of health, but they wanted to be able to address when noncompliance with medical treatments and regimens and dietary regimens are because of the caregiver's actions and not the patient's from a pediatric perspective. You can see there is this caregiver noncompliance with patient's dietary regimen due to financial hardship, which is the correlate to the term we made, right? So the AAP ran with that, created a caregiver mirror regarding that term, and then also built out supplemental and additional caregiver noncompliances to match all of the other noncompliance terms that are in ICD-10 at this time. It's important to note just briefly that we recognize noncompliance is not a great term. Unfortunately, within the constraints of ICD-10-CM, we're bound to kind of mirror that build. I mean, it's not a patient-centered term. It's not what we use in clinical practice anymore, but this is the term that forms the root of all of the sister terms in ICD. I'm going to stop for a second because this is a major, once we leave this area, things change a bit. So we went through our submission of those initial terms. We've talked about our recommendation for patient noncompliance with dietary regimen secondary to financial hardship. I actually missed, Z91.190, which is a recommendation for noncompliance with any other medical treatment and regimen due to financial hardship. So then you'd have medications, dietary matters, and any other like episode of care. So any of those things could be covered and related to financial hardship as the cause. And then we've also talked about specifically the AAP's recommendations for caregiver noncompliance again. Any questions about this content? Okay, I'm gonna keep on going. I'm gonna go scroll. There's a lot of caregiver terms that the AAP is recommending, so we're scrolling through those. I plan to write a letter in support of those, again, as family medicine and pediatric faculty. Even though we did not suggest them, I am in favor of their addition to the ICD-10 taxonomy. So this next term, Z91.82, is something we're going to sit with for a second again. We're showing you here how it looks in the submission packet. We'll go into this on the slides again and kind of our rationale, but we submitted, I'm going to remind folks, personal history of military service. Already in the ecosystem was personal history of military deployment. And we did not participate in this, but the committee and the staff of NCHS combined those two terms into one term. And in collaboration with our subject matter experts, we have concerns on that, and we'll go into that when we segue to the slideshow and our rationales. And there we go. So that is the submission as it stands. And any questions before we slip to the slides and kind of go through our rationales about some of our concerns and thoughts regarding the submission? Am I missing anything in the chat, Katya?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Again, this document is freely and publicly available. If you can find it on the ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee webpage, it is the topic packet for the September 14th and 15th meeting, and we start on page 187. I'm now going to stop sharing, and Katya's going to take over so that we can just kind of settle on the slides that we presented at the public call in our committees and talk through some of our commentary.
I'm just pulling it up now, I think. Let me full screen, sorry.
All right. So this slide is really our submission. It doesn't contain the health insurance and security slide because that actually was not the AAP. We don't know who was that submitter. And now I'm going to go to the next slide. And I really would love to have a conversation here to make sure if anyone has questions, they're answered. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Probably the simplest thing is to start with the veteran status. I didn't organize it that way, but the submitter is either Gravity edited by the CDC just to express that it doesn't necessarily match what we submitted, and then a question mark for when we don't know. So So we basically, in no instances are any of these terms like retired or not recommended. It's very customary, and this is what happened with Gravity, for things to kind of go back to the drawing board and be continually thought through. And so in each of these instances, we're just asking that we have more time, right? That we take it back and kind of put it back in the hopper and think about how to get it right. Again, the simplest one is probably our thought with the Veterans Affairs, the Office of Veterans Affairs, regarding the combination of personal history of military service and deployment into one code. The VA is very clear that this does not meet their purposes. They have the same recommendation that we do, which is you either go forward with our suggestion, which was history of military service, in addition to history of military deployment, or you just return to history of military deployment, and then we bring back to the drawing board and back to the March meeting the concept of how to address presence of veteran status. Any questions or thoughts regarding this recommendation from Gravity in partnership with our subject matter experts?
Evelyn, this is Mary Kratz. Having some experience with the military, there is a distinction between military veteran and potentially those that retire from the military.
Yeah, so we did go through some of those subtleties when we were working with the VA on the diagnoses suggestions. We saw this history of military service as kind of a first step, under which is certainly broader than veteran status, but it occupied an area that was completely unrepresented because all there was personal history of military deployment. And it's kind of a grouper of all the different possible elements you could have, of which a very specific population within that is veteran. Is that helpful?
That is spot on. Another component of this is, as we look at HL7 as a global standard, sometimes military service also encompasses the police force.
Yeah, so that's when the definitions, that's really interesting. I think it makes me think of the work we're doing right now with the VA. My Lord, the team at the VA we're collaborating right now is very robust across firm and the DoD and the VA, and those differentiations from the global concept we're trying to represent here and how that plays into representations of military status within fire is something that happens. That integration is an ongoing topic, both within our subject matter expert meetings, and then of course in some of the connectathons. I believe they had participated in the June connectathon, the CMS connectathon. Monique, is that correct? I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, Monique.
Ask me again, Sarah.
Yeah, so I was just trying to mention that I do believe it was the June CMS connectathon that the VA was testing. Yeah.
Yes, I listened in on their. They did show their IG in June at the CMS Connectathon, and we did listen in so that we had a sense of their perspective, and they also tried to participate somewhat in ours.
So all that to say that all the different ramifications of this ICD-10 term might not be represented in this code, but Gravity in collaboration, both with the terminology division from the VA and with the VA representatives within HL7, are trying to address this concept. Is that helpful?
That's helpful. Another way to approach the other components of the standard is to make a view of personal history of public service and make military, veteran, police, Congress, etc., an attribute of this element.
Your connections, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Am I the only one?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it was a little staccato. So Mary,
Only do so much with Verizon. I'll repeat. The notion here is to have this be a personal history of public service in deployment, and then make military, veteran, police force, government service, etc., an attribute of this element.
yeah, so all of that would be enabled by this. It sounds like that all those possibilities are enabled by following the request that we have to not go forward with this statement. Like, so Gravity put forth a statement, a request for an ICD-10 code in collaboration with the VA last year. It became this, our request so far, unless there's significant dissent. Our request by the Gravity terminology team is to go back to history of military deployment and revisit this in a way with the CDC that can meet joint needs, because this actually obfuscates the problem by merging two very different types of risk. So what I'm hearing you say, Mary, is that I agree with everything you're saying, and that would be enabled, that evaluation would be enabled if we pulled this back and work to get it right for the March meeting.
And Sarah, happy to assist from my military and global health experience with this one.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the veteran concept? Okay, so I'm now I'm going to leave the most tricky one for the end. So I'm going to focus then on health insurance insecurity. We are going to formally request that this be brought back to the table in March. Again, not saying no, just saying that we think it needs a little bit of work because many of the concepts that are included, well, first of all, we don't understand like a clear definition of what health insurance insecurity is. So as a SDOH, standards terminology division, in project, we aren't clear what this concept, like what the guardrails for this concept are in general. And then in specific, we're concerned by some of the inclusion terms that include multiple different concepts that don't seem to be aligned with health insurance insecurity as a parent, including medical cost burden, underinsurance, and each of these carry different kinds of risk. So are there any questions? And again, this is not that it's going away. In fact, actually on the Gravity timeline, we have a domain proposal for healthcare access that we've been working on for some time that would be really elegantly aligned with revisiting this concept through the Gravity process with intention. It's one of our kind of organized sets of domains, and that would include medical cost burden and underinsurance and elements of healthcare access. Any concerns or questions regarding the Gravity request to put this back in the hopper and have it go through? Really, we're asking that it go through the Gravity the Gravity process as a critical element of risk, guided by subject matter experts with really clear definitions and screening tools the way we do. Any concerns? I really want to make sure that everyone understands as a Gravity member that this is our desire. No, it doesn't sound like we have any questions. Okay. All right, so I left the harder one for the last one. Okay, so this is actually, so the first one was us asking to revisit something that was edited after our submission. The second one was us asking to revisit something that was not even in our submission that we would like to lend insight on. This last one is us asking to revisit something where we submitted it and then the taxonomy changed after the fact, and there's opportunities to improve it. And it's a little bit tricky to describe, but so we originally a year ago asked to build Z59.87 to represent when an individual couldn't access necessary social needs. The reason why we're asking to revisit it is because, unbeknownst to us, we did not think that this was going to happen. The CDC authorized the return of Z58 in the taxonomy in order to build the space where lack of adequate water supply moved into. So by submitting, if you all, I'm going to try to talk super slow and you can ask all the questions you need, and I'm wishing I had a better slide, but back in the day, there was only Z59.4, which combined lack of adequate food and safe drinking water. That was not in agreement with the international standard, which had water in a Z58 route and food insecurity or lack of adequate food in a Z59 route. And in ICD-10-CM in the US, there was no real estate for Z58, which encompasses concerns of the environment or the setting of care, right, or the setting of where the individual lives. So when we asked for a specific code for food insecurity, the CDC, we didn't even ask for a return to Z58 originally because we didn't think we'd get it. We thought it was too bold of a move. However, be careful what you ask for. So in analysis and working with Donna Pickett, who's the head of that division, she very clearly stated that she thought the most elegant thing to do was to return Z58, build that matching lack of adequate water, which matches international ICD. And what that created an opportunity for was other places to build some of the material hardship codes that we know we need to build. Because when we entered into material hardship as a concept, for those of you who were with us in that work, which was January, February, March, and April of this year, we were jointly trying to consider when an individual couldn't acquire a social need, whether it be through financial concerns or through it not occurring in the environment. The truth is now, all of those, I can't get it because it's not in the environment codes, are really best placed in Z58 now that it's come back. And so what Gravity wants to do is work to represent those concepts where they belong, which is in Z58. Again, not abandon them, but put them correctly where they go, where they belong, up there in Z58. And because we can do so, to change the name slightly to make it more clear to the user what we mean by unable to access a social need because it's not in the environment. So we can work to change the material hardship name now that we have Z58. That is, of course, the most complex thing that we're asking because we're actually changing our own submission, and maybe there's a lot of questions and we want to make sure that you all have time to ask them. Maybe there
I
are.
just want to throw out there that actually makes sense. I think you explained it very well, and it makes sense to me for my part.
Yay, Ned! What about, yeah?
This is Corey Smith from the AMA. I just have a quick question since international has kind of come up twice.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand sort of, it seems this submission and the submissions we're talking about are specific to ICD-10-CM,
Correct.
but it sounds like there's some other, consideration of what's in, the international version of ICD. Do you have anything, in terms of Gravity's objectives, are there sort of international objectives as it relates to terminology, or is this just kind of, as part of the ICD-10-CM process, there is, some reconciliation that happens with the international edition?
It's more so that it's easier to make a case for something if it already exists in international when it's within ICD-10, right? So it wasn't, even though we never dreamed of being able to get Z58 back, it was not actually as hard as we thought because it mirrors international ICD, right? So because you can't build dissonant, really like directly dissonant to ICD-10 International. So there's lots of things we haven't been able to do because it just doesn't jive. But this ask was actually possible, but it was more easy to achieve because of the precedent in international ICD And the other half of your question is there an international focus from a simplicity and efficiency perspective? Yes, because there has to be. We are commenting on ICD-10-11 based on what we've learned through the Gravity project so far. But that's future steps. So for right now, we don't do any advocating with ICD International. It's just easier to make changes if it's something that there's precedent for.
Okay, thank you. Then just one follow-up as it relates to the question earlier about sort of global requirements for veteran content. Was that sort of global in the context of international, or was that global in some other sort of healthcare context that I'm not aware of?
Mary, I believe you were speaking global as international based on the way you framed the question. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry. A little trouble with the mute button there.
All right, so I'm going to settle back with material hardship. Are there any other concerns about this? I mean, I feel like I feel like it makes sense, but I really want to make sure it makes sense to everybody because this is a product we're all invested in getting right. Sounds like no. Can I call out a friend specifically who I saw on the call, Julia Skapik? Can I call you out, friend? Because this actually, you were the origin of this based on your comment on the yes with comment on the material hardship set. Does this make sense, Julia, from your perspective? I really did call you out. Maybe she's muted. Or maybe, yeah. So anyway, I don't want to.
She's no longer on the call, Sarah.
Oh no, Trat! I saw her on.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I see her. I do see her. She has no audio, it looks like.
Okay, so Julia, just send me an email. Just know that specifically, I need to honor the fact that Julia and Monique, talking right now, early recognized the complexity of trying to build material hardship where we thought we had to, which is under Z59, because of, again, considering both financial and access concerns, like not able to get it because it doesn't exist and not able to get it because I can't pay for it. So I really am, I'm very hopeful of the ability to clarify this by going through Z58. Okay. If there are no other questions, and then what I'd like to do is review how to submit comments. And and when we submit comments, what we'll do is we'll follow up with an email with the hyperlinks. And what we'll do is copy and paste directly the comments Gravity has on these. We'll copy that that slide in the presentation as well, so you can see Gravity's response, right, and have it for reference. So the slide 16. So these are the next action steps, right? So if you want to review the proposal, again, you can download it. It's on page 187. If you want to view the presentation, you can do that as well. It's at timestamp 5610, and there's a passcode. We did all that for you. November 15th is the deadline for receipt of public comments. It's just an email to NCHS ICD-10-CM at cdc.gov. We are incredibly grateful for you all coming. I do want to remain present if anyone else has any questions. The primary objective for today was just to ensure that our community could see very clearly the rationale, could have time to review the submission, and to ensure that we're in alignment with our community regarding our request to kind of pull some of these things back and refine them a little bit. Any other final questions or concerns we can assist you all with? Linda, did I mess anything up, or are we okay?
We are just great.
Linda's the one who tells me whether I'm doing things right within ICD-10-CM. So she's a sincere expert in this space. So I always want to make sure that I'm not leading us astray. So if there are no other questions, we would love to give you all back time. In Vermont, it is a glorious fall day. I can go get a little sun on my face, maybe drink my tea. We do want to state that if you have any further questions regarding ICD-10-CM, as you know, committed and members of our community, we're happy to answer them. You can just write us and we will review. We thank you for your time. You all have a lovely Friday.
Happy fall, all.
Happy fall!
Thank you, Sarah.